The scientist bends over the microscope, utterly absorbed in the experiment, as he examines a human cell. While the cell is invisible to the naked eye, through the lens of the microscope, it is alive with movement and tiny details. The innovations made with microscopes can mean life or death. From the discovery of DNA to the development of the polio vaccine, advances made with microscopes have altered the course of history and saved millions of lives. Microscopes, however, are not suitable for everything. The Pilgrims, as they sailed on the Mayflower, would not have used a microscope to spot land. They would have more likely used a telescope, and indeed, telescopes are useful for seeing large objects from far away. Telescopes give us the big picture. Today, it appears that Americans do not have either a microscopic or even a telescopic knowledge of the greatest document in our nation's history, the U.S. Constitution. How's your constitutional knowledge? See if you can identify the following statement. From each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. If you said Karl Marx, the author of the Communist Manifesto, you are correct. If you said the Constitution, you are not alone. Law school survey, 2/3 of Americans identified this statement as a part of our Constitution. Clearly, the majority of Americans do not have even a basic knowledge of the principles of our governing document. Before beginning my research, I couldn't have told you that there are 27 amendments, or distinguished between the Articles of Confederation and the Constitution. A lack of knowledge can have dangerous consequences, for if we do not know of the principles that founded our nation, then we cannot hope to preserve America. As Thomas Jefferson said, if a nation expects to be ignorant and free, it expects what never was and never will be. Our Constitution must be studied, both with a microscope and a telescope. However, before beginning our analysis, we should examine the history behind this document. On May 25th, 1787, 55 delegates gathered in the hot, stuffy building now known as Independence Hall. For 4 months they labored. Tempers flared. Delegates resigned from the convention in protest. The most pressing conflict concerned the legislative branch. Small states wanted equal representation in Congress, while the large states wanted representation based on population. The debate between the large and small states grew so intense that the convention itself almost disbanded. Finally, Delegate Roger Sherman stepped forward with the Connecticut Compromise, which proposed a bicameral or two-house legislature. The House of Representatives would award delegates based on population, while the Senate would have equal representation for each state. With this foundational issue resolved, the convention moved forward. But there were still many details to be decided. Delegates argued for a 3, 4, or even a 15-year term for the president. Some wanted 1 president. Others wanted 3. The debates dragged on, and by September 17th, out of the 55 delegates who began the convention, only 39 agreed to sign the final draft. Yet, these 39 were proud to sign it. Benjamin Franklin, the oldest delegate, needed help signing his name, and as he did so, tears rolled down his face. History sets the context, as we now take hold of a telescope to examine the principles of this document. Just as the Pilgrims might have used a telescope to spot the landmass of America, when we look at the Constitution from afar, we can see its guiding principles. The Constitution reflects the ideals of the revolutionaries who founded America, ideals like the equality of mankind, taxation with representation, and the rights of the majority and minority in government. One of the greatest principles is separation of powers, which refers to the idea that no one part of the government, whether it is executive, legislative, or judicial, can overpower another branch. The Constitution intentionally divides the government into parts to prevent a tyrannical government from violating the rights of the people. To gain a better understanding of the concept of separation of powers, let us take a closer look at the Constitution with our hypothetical microscope. Just like the game of rock, paper, scissors, where no element is stronger than another. The Constitution places detailed restrictions, known as checks and balances, on the powers of each branch. For example, Article 1 gives the legislative branch the power to make laws. But there's a catch. The executive can veto laws made in the legislative branch. Article 2 gives the executive branch the power to nominate justices to the Supreme Court, but the Senate must confirm them. These are but a few of the details which enforce the doctrine of separation of powers and keep our government in check. Perhaps some of the greatest details in the Constitution are the amendments. While over 11,000 amendments have been proposed, only 27 have passed. The first 10 amendments are known as the Bill of Rights, and these focus on protecting the people from injustice. Understanding the details of the Bill of Rights and of the Constitution is essential for the preservation of our freedoms and liberties. If we do not know of our own rights in the Constitution, how will we know if they've been violated? One man learned this the hard way. In 1961, a burglary occurred at the Bay Harbor pool room in Florida. Clarence Gideon, who was spotted nearby, was arrested and put on trial. Because Gideon was too poor to hire a lawyer, he requested one from the Florida Circuit Court. But they denied his request, and he ended up defending himself quite poorly during his own trial. The court, of course, found him guilty and sentenced him to prison. But there, in the prison library, Gideon took advantage of his free time to study none other than the U.S. Constitution. By examining the Sixth Amendment, which requires the accused to have the assistance of counsel for his defense, Gideon realized that the court had been wrong in denying him a lawyer. He then hand-wrote a letter to the Supreme Court, asking them to hear his case. They said yes, and in 1963, in the case Gideon versus Wainwright, the Supreme Court ruled unanimously that Gideon's conviction was unlawful because he had been denied his Sixth Amendment right. His case illustrates how imperative it is for us to understand the details of our rights in the Constitution. Our Constitution is an incredible document, but, ladies and gentlemen, a Constitution alone cannot sustain a nation. Only the people can accomplish that. By studying this document and learning its principles, we can defend it and defend our own rights and liberties. Some might say that it is too much work to learn about our government, that in this modern age, we have far better things to do with our time. In response, I would refer to the words of Nathan Hale, a patriot who was captured by the British for espionage. Before being hanged, he said, "I only regret that I have but one life to lose for my country." The least we can do is take the time to learn about our government in order to preserve it, so that such sacrifices do not need to be made again by patriots such as Nathan Hale. Having both a microscopic and a telescopic knowledge of the Constitution has never been more imperative than now. With a fragile economy, turbulent foreign relations, and a government that is struggling to maintain unity, we have a future that is unclear. But when we look at the Constitution with a telescope, we learn of its guiding principles, and we can use this knowledge to elect officials who will honor those same principles. And when we zoom in on the Constitution with a microscope, our rights and responsibilities come into focus, and we can use this knowledge to defend our civil liberties, just like Clarence Gideon. America's future may seem blurry and out of focus, but when we look at the Constitution with a telescope and a microscope, our future becomes clear. America can remain, as stated in the Pledge of Allegiance, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.